Bonjour, James.
So how are you?
Excellent. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, bonne année. I've tasted a lot of 2019s, about 1,300 now. It's been a lot, and there's been some fantastic wines and also a few less good ones. But what's your feeling about 2019 in general?
In general, well, to understand the wines, we have to go back to how they came up during the growing season. And as you know, we came out of a mild February and March, early bud break, 10 days ahead of normal. And then a cold and wet April, cold May, not too wet, but cool. And so very slowly we caught up to the normal phenology date. End of May, we get a slightly warmer spell that started flowering. And we got short windows of 10 days that were nice enough to get a good set. And then right after early June, again, some cooler and very wet conditions at the end of bloom. We got even it got stormy actually, because on June 7th, we got the Miguel storm that actually broke a few shoots over here for anything that was not trellised properly at that time. And then mid-June, it could have been anyone guess to know in what direction the vintage was going, because obviously at that point we were right on the average phenology dates. We had a good set, even if we had a bit of Château because of the cooler weather during bloom.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, cooler.
And so it could have been in any direction, and luckily it went in the right direction for 4 months, because we entered a warmer and drier summer from June 23rd on. We got 4 months of gorgeous weather, a few heat spells in July, no excessive heat, no sunburn on the berries, so that was great. A bit of rain at the end of the month, around July 26th, but only 31 millimeters, not much after a month of very warm temperatures. That was a relief for the vines. Perfect to start versaison, to even the crop out as well, get things more uniform. And then August was more on par with the average, 51 millimeters, normal temperatures, perfect for ripening properly the tannins. And then September, first 10 days cool again, then 10 days of very warm weather. And then we start to see a bit of dehydration on some of the merlot, especially planted on gravelly soils. Mm-hmm. The Cabernet Sauvignon was fine at that point, even if on young vines you start to see a bit of water stress as well. And that's when we started harvest, because the first merlots, the earliest one, were getting concentrated. The sugars were increasing. You would see the acid drop also quite rapidly. And so we started to peak around September 18, 19, the first few merlots. And then we entered a cooler again in September 22nd, about, that we cut for the whole, for the whole harvest. And so what that did, we started to see some rain. Overall in September, we got 35 millimeters, an inch and a half. So nothing huge. It's below normal for September in Bordeaux. But it was actually a real blessing. We are very happy to see it come at that time, because that stopped the dehydration and absolutely froze the sugar content. So we didn't see increases in sugar in berries. It stabilized also the acid drop in the fruit, and it let us wait for the perfect time for the tannins ripening. And so we were able from that point on to really peak at our leisure, taste the fruit, decide when it was ready, and let the tannins ripen to perfection. And that allowed us to push the Cabernet back in October and pick them where we felt they were under perfect conditions of fruit flavor, tannin ripeness, and acid to sugar.
So when did you start picking the Cabernet then?
The first 2 weeks of October.
Because that's now I'm starting to understand, because, for example, some wines, obviously not, it's mostly, let's say, in lesser terroir, like parts of Médoc or Côte de Blaye, and the wines can be slightly herbaceous, or they seem diluted in the mid palate. And so maybe people panicked, like they thought if it was just they saw the rain, maybe they harvested right away or during the rain, while you saw it as an advantage and you waited, and then
Yes.
it was better for the Cabernet.
Yeah, because at the end of September, most of the Cabernets were not ready. From a flavor standpoint and tannin and phenolic standpoint as well. And since there was absolutely no pressure from the botrytis, and the rain was moderate, I mean, an inch and a half of rain is not going to obviously make us run and get the crop in a hurry. We can handle a lot more than that, especially on these gravelly soils, with all the vines as well. I think the trick maybe in this vintage was potentially on some plots, especially younger vines, you could have had a large crop, and so that may be some of the dilution you see, sometimes. So crop size was on the higher side for younger vines. Obviously, all the vines, they regulate themselves very well, and they had a bit of Château also at Bloom. So they had a normal crop that they were able to ripen properly. And also, when you push harvest in early October for the earliest terroir, because over here in Pauillac, we have some of the earliest terroir. Obviously, if you are in cooler part, you have to wait a bit longer, and then it could become a bit more tricky.
Was 2019 a little bit more tricky than 18? I know 18 was cold and then boiling hot for 50 days. Was 19 more difficult? Like you had to think about what you were doing when you were doing it?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think 18 was more straightforward. You knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Things were more obvious on the ground to make decisions. But 19, honestly, 19 was not very difficult either. If you are in the field looking at what was happening, you could make the proper decision at every step of the process. And even when you start to see rain, when you have a crop that's so perfect, so healthy, and on top of that, that it needs a bit of rain to finish, to ripen it properly, because the vines, obviously, if you don't like to see too much water stress towards harvest, because it makes for a different type of ripening with more concentration, different fruit profile, obviously, a bit more plummy and higher sugar. So going into that harvest, we are very confident that it was going in the right direction, and so we really took our time to do it properly, and we saw the gains every day, obviously, in the fruits.
And what about, so how was the weather during, well, you had that rain in between, you sort of in between the harvest. So it was, but again, it wasn't a lot of rain. Bordeaux winemakers are really used to dealing with rain. That's part of the Atlantic climate. What about, and what was the selection like? What was it? Did you have to select a lot of grapes out, or was it okay? What was the?
Well, the overall, the average quality that we were able to reach in 19 was very high. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it was a slightly larger crop than 18. 18, the selection was lower. We used more, higher percentage of the plots into the Grand Vin in general out of the estates. 19, we went back to a more normal selection because the overall profile was able to, I think, if we go back to 18, I think the vintage takes over from the terroir a bit more than it does in 19. And so I think you have a less transparent view over where the lots come from. In 18, the average of absolutely great quality fruit coming from the vineyards was higher than normal. In 19, we are back to a more normal look at the vineyards, where the grapes reflected more where they came from. So more transparency in their food profile. And so given that, obviously, you can select more traditionally the lots after fermentation, because the food profile is different. The tannin structure, obviously, also reflects a different type of terroir. And so you become more selective, more discriminant, and you're able to make wines that have a true reflection of the soil type they are from.
Yeah, because all those years, the different plots that have the best exposition or drainage or whatever, and so that you could really, it just worked out normally does. While 18
Absolutely.
and hotter, everything was ripe. it had that Soleil sort of character, richer, riper character.
It leveled things out, leveled the field a little bit in 18, and 19, you see more, more differences. It's a clearer picture, I think.
And what, as far as the vinification and the winemaking in general, did 19 present any problems?
No, when you get the fruit of that quality, it was rich without being overly rich. The percentage of alcohol was back to your range that we are very familiar with, almost a half% below what we had in 18. So extraction is lower. You don't have to be as cautious. So now we really vinify them normally with a great confidence as well, because we knew the tannins from the skins and the seeds were perfectly ripe. So there was no risk of over extraction. And we went in the vinification process with a lot of confidence. And I think that the wines reflect that as well.
Was there any, would you say it's a merlot year or a cabernet year, or what do you think?
Well, when you look at the blends breakdown, obviously, I'm going to tell you it's a cabernet blend, it's a cabernet year, and I think it is for the most part, just because of the water deficits that we experienced in 19. I think really favored Cabernet Sauvignon that really thrives in this type of conditions. Now for the merlot, except for the one I mentioned on gravelly soils, because we still have some older plots that were planted on that type of soil. And those, I believe at some points in the process, lacked water. In July, I think they suffered from the heat a little bit. And in mid-September also, during the earlier, the warmer part of the month, when they saw concentration, I think we could have had, a fresher profile if we didn't have that type of heat on that type of terroir. Now the merlot on the clay part of our estates performed extremely well, and those are the ones that went into the Grand Vin. They really produced very deep, rich, structured merlot with a full flavors, just gorgeous. So it was really terroir dependent, and so we had some fantastic merlots in 19. But all the cabs were absolutely great. So it's a perfect vintage for Cabernet, and it's a great vintage for Merlot, depending on the soil type you had.
For example, Merlots from the best terroirs in Palmerel are amazing. They're really fantastic wines. But again, those have clay, or they're clay and gravel. So that those soils that retained water really did well. What about when you think to yourself or talk to Philippe or to other members of the family or friends or whatever? Are there any comparisons you like to make between 2019 and other vintages?
Well, first, we all like to taste it and discuss about it and even drink it sometimes. It's a vintage everybody likes, so that's great.
That's good.
And then if we look for reference points, I know it would have been, it would be vintages that have an earlier drinkability, that have depth, that have this quality of tannins. I think you get that from the hang time. We are able to really wait for those tannins to be perfectly polished. You have that type of quality in 15, I believe.
Yeah.
Tannins, very silky. We had that in 2009 as well. Yeah. If you go back, further, I think 82, with that plush, ripe fruits, just gorgeous from the beginning, and stays gorgeous, all the way through, 40 years after. Yeah. I think it's also a good reference point.
Let's do the tasting then. Do you want to try the Armagnac then to start?
Absolutely, yes.
So you've really been, I can see at one time Armagnac was really much more like soft and clean and, very easy, but you're really believing now you can make a much more structured wine.
Yeah, the viticulture has evolved to try to express the sites, and it has some areas that have that depth of power and structure that are a bit more clay. It has obviously most of what makes the Armagnac is two great plateaus of very deep sandy gravel intermixed with a bit of clay. So it has a terroir to make a powerful wine, but with a lot of elegance and great fragrance. I think to me the perfume of the Armagnac really show that light gravelly soil. But yes, there's been a bit more viticulture that's a bit more detailed, I would say, the past 10-15 years.
It has such freshness, this wine too. You taste it, it has a really, one thing that some 19s lack is the center palate. And this wine, that's the best thing about this wine, is the milieu de palate. It's really has a beautiful center palate and very compacted.
Very layered. Huh?
Yeah.
And at the same time, great depth. It's very vibrant, as you said. It retains the freshness.
Okay, so now we do Pastorel, right?
Yes.
Is the policy still to release this late or not?
It was until last year.
Okay.
So last year was the first vintage where we released some en primeur.
Okay. Current. And how do you make the selection for the second wine of Clerc-Milon?
Well, it's a selection that starts in the field. When you taste the fruit, you see which one has a potential for slightly more extraction, because you get the tannins in the seeds and skins that are fully ripe, that have a certain quality to them. And you know that you are going to build that fruit into a powerful wine that will have the ability to age in new oak for 18 months and make a great grand vin. And you have others that have other qualities. They're fresher, more vibrant. They don't necessarily have the same depth of tannins structure, but you can turn them into a very fleshy, very juicy, very savory type of wine.
Yeah, it's actually, you could drink it now.
Yes.
It's very good. I like that.
Well, you could eat the grapes when they're young. You can drink the wine early as well.
And you're right, the tannins definitely have a different profile than the Grand Vin at Clerc, which is much more structured. But I haven't tasted it yet. But traditionally, that's how the wine is. It's like we used to always say, baby Mouton. It's very structured. Wow, nice nose, Clerc.
But it's a vintage that tasted well, always showed great during the barrel aging.
Yeah.
Barely moved, blinked an eye after bottling. You didn't really see a bottle shock on this vintage. I think they do benefit from a bit of aeration, obviously, because there's a structure there that can take it, but you can pop the cork and enjoy it right away. You can see all the qualities. Obviously, it's going to evolve and expand in the glass.
Wow. That really has a lot. This has an excellent finish. Wow.
72% Cabernet Sauvignon. You have to go back to 86 to see as much cab in the blend at Carmignon.
Wow. And what's the rest?
The rest is 22 merlot, 4 Cabernet Franc, and 2 petits verres d'eau.
The tannins, you can really feel them, and they're chewy, but at the same time, they're very polished.
Tasting these wines, it's true that we could feel they come from a cool type of vintage.
Yeah.
There's a coolness from the menthol, from the minerality. And that's, I think, very interesting.
Okay, let's try the Petit Mouton. So tell me again, or more now in your mind, what's the raison d'être of Petit Mouton? Like, almost in a way, it's almost getting too good. Like before, it was like, drink that young, second wine of Petit Mouton, but now it really has its own character almost now.
I agree. It's and that character emerged over the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
I think the way the places it comes from, it's still the same as it was 20 years ago. Because what makes Mouton, is the center of the two plateaus for the most part. And 90% of Mouton comes from the same blocks every year. And whatever is all the blocks that are around the heart of the two plateaus. For the close edge to what makes Mouton can go, in one blend or the other, depending on the vintage. And whatever is the larger circle makes Petit Mouton every year. And so those blocks, we know what makes Petit Mouton pretty much every year. That's the thing that changed, I think, is the viticulture we apply there over the past 2 decades. I think we've progressively applied the same viticulture on those blocks as the ones we are applying to Mouton's blocks. And so obviously that raised the level of quality of the grapes we got from there. And then as the estates overall progressed, I think we generally, we've been making gains in quality. Petit Mouton benefited from that, but even more because all of a sudden it was treated the same equally to what was making the Grand Vin. And so obviously the character is a bit different because the terroirs are not exactly the same, but it's so close that you get a sense of tasting, something that's connected to Mouton anyway. Yeah. But also it has its own identity because it's, it's slightly different terroir. And since it comes every year from the same plots, you see the evolution, you recognize the wines, it has a true identity. And I think that's what we see in the glass the last few years.
Totally. This is very structured one too, and needs time. It's really impressive. Okay, so now we'll try the Grand Vin. Wow. Because also this and the Mouton right away on the nose, you have much cooler fruits with like some sort of mint, and then the lead pencil, the classic, Pauillac character. Oh my God, the nose and the dark fruits are incredible.
To me, that's what's fascinating in this vintage. You get the full array of aromas that Cabernet Sauvignon and that type of terroir can offer. Sometimes you get a more narrow window, narrow peak of what Cabernet can do. Over here, you get from the dark fruit, the licorice, all the way to the cool menthol, some nice noble herbal notes. You get the crushed notes, you get the flowery, you get the spice. I mean, I think it's Cabernet Sauvignon on full display in this vintage.
The tannins are really intense but fine, and they're very long, just on and on and on. No?
I absolutely agree. They're interesting because they provide the structure and, the richness.
Like it's cadré, like it's framed. The tannins are holding everything together and just go along.
And it keeps rolling on the tongue.
Yeah.
It never ends.
And I like that, just a hint of that, like currant bush, or like you said, the good sort of greenness. You want the fresh herb character, or mint, or whatever.
And every time we go back to it, we discover some new components. It's very pure. It evolves correctly in the glass, and it really makes me want to go back to it.
Me too.
Time after time, and try to understand and see, everything it has to offer, because it feels like we're only scratching the surface of what that wine delivers.
I totally agree. Okay. Well, listen, that was a great tasting. And thanks for all the renseignements, all the information. It was really helpful, because I'm just about ready to write my story. Anyways, say hello to everyone.
Merci beaucoup, James. Very nice seeing you.
Okay. Compliment, merci. Au revoir.